Egypt's youth charting a new way forward. They may be articulate and passionate, but are they free and happy? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to our second special edition of Inside Story from Cairo. I'm Imran Garta. Over a third of Egypt's population of 80 million are not yet past their teens. It's an old cliche, but the youth are the future of this regional power. But with many unable to find work, even graduates, and in a country with a restrictive political arena, the youth are facing many daunting questions about their future. Nashwa Nasruddin met some young Egyptians here in Cairo. Here's what she found out.
My name is Mohammed Hassan. I'm 28 years old. I graduated 6 years ago from Cairo University. My goal was always to graduate and get a good job. I've been driving my father's microbus now for 4 years. The hardest thing I've been through is realizing that dreams don't come true.
The dreams of most of Egypt's students end at graduation. This is when they are greeted with the frustration of an often fruitless job search. Officially, Egypt's unemployment rate is at 10%, but for recent graduates, the rate is far higher. Many, like Muhammad, are forced to take jobs unrelated to their studies.
Most of my friends have done the same. The business studies graduate works in a supermarket, and the law graduate in a construction company. This is not the job I had dreamed I would be doing after 15 years of studying. University graduates are victimized in Egypt. Their degrees are becoming worthless. Today, a driver or someone working in a petrol station will have a higher degree.
In many societies, harsh economic conditions often have a galvanizing effect on the political opposition. But not in Egypt, where speaking out can be fraught with danger, as 26-year-old Mohammed al-Sharqawi has discovered. He's been a political activist for several years and was one of the founders of the Youth for Change movement, which was set up in 2005. Like many young Egyptians at the time, he reacted to the injustices he witnessed.
We created an alternative reality on the internet, where we could live a freer life. And we started writing, not necessarily sticking to journalistic rules, but just expressing what was inside us. We began to publish news of police torture and labor strikes. Media outlets even started to use our footage. We wanted to take the internet to the streets, and the streets to the internet.
Muhammad's political activism has seen him arrested 3 times in the past 3 years.
We used to hear that it was normal for people to get detained, but it was always political Islamists. But now, they arrest anyone.
Muhammad remains politically active, despite the risks. But not everyone has his courage. And in such an intimidating political atmosphere, it's no wonder that the dreams of youth rapidly evaporate. And some would do anything to leave.
If I get the chance to leave Egypt, I will emigrate. I couldn't find what I wanted in my country. Young people who leave want to establish themselves. They want to get married, start a family, buy a car, a flat, and to have a life. All they see here is a country that is deteriorating economically and politically.
But some of those who choose to stay will no longer suffer in silence.
Our generation of the 90s and 2000s isn't able to live with the dreams of the 70s generation, who were calling for a people's revolution. We're just calling for justice. We really used to believe that tomorrow we would wake up to a new government in Egypt and real civil justice. Today, we just pray to God that no more people will die. It doesn't matter whether Mubarak stays in power or his son takes over. But let's hope the ill will get treatment and that people will be able to eat.
But in Egypt today, such basic requirements can no longer be taken for granted. Nashwa Nasruddin for Inside Story in Cairo.
And joining us now to discuss this issue are our guests, Jawad Nabulsi, the head of NCE, an association of NGOs, and head of the Community Development Committee for the First Lady, Mrs. Mubarak's Youth International Peace. Next to him, Hussam Al-Hamlawi, independent journalist, and next to him, Ahmed Salah, a Kifaya activist. Thanks a lot for joining us, gentlemen. Jawad, if I could start off with you, we saw a pretty powerful report there from Nashwa. From what I saw and heard, Egypt doesn't seem to be a very nice place for a young person to live in.
Yes, I mean, there's pretty rough conditions. There are also some positive aspects, but the rough conditions tend to overcome the positive aspects that are in the community. So I would say that there's both positive and negative.
But how would you address the negative that you saw in that report, particularly those who seem to have no hope economically, educationally? They seem to have been pretty fed up.
I have maybe a neutral point of view. I'm active on the civil society side. I'm also active on some of the governmental side. I would say some people are really, really frustrated, especially the youth. And what we all agree upon is change. But it's the way that we want to achieve change. For me, as I see it's an opportunity in Egypt. There are so many problems, but also there's a lot of opportunities to change. So the way you take it or the way you achieve it, some try to achieve it politically, some try to achieve it through protests, some try to achieve it through changing the lives of others. We do work in the upper of Egypt where people live 60, 70 pounds a month, and we are about to, and we can change. And this is what I think is happiness, is that you can change people's lives much easier than when I was living in Canada, where everyone is happy, everything's going well, everything is beautiful. But here in Egypt, I think it's more of an opportunity.
Hussam, there's an optimistic look at things from Jawad. Would you concur?
Well, I'm optimistic about the prospects of change in Egypt, but not via the government and not necessarily via the civil society-affronted projects.
So is someone like Jawad working within these limits which are unnatural?
Well, I tend to see these limits as crippling after a while, and we're living through some rough times, and we need some radical solutions in order to overcome them. I mean, we have in Egypt a saying that says, "ما ينفعش تعمل الفسيخ شربات." You cannot make a sweet drink out of rotten fish. And the current regime that we have, with all of its figures and institutions and projects that they put forward, it's still a rotten fish. It doesn't matter how much sugar, you put on it, how much cosmetic reforms you introduce to it.
Ahmed Salah, you're one of those who wears his heart on his sleeve, a kafaya activist, but surely all your activism so far hasn't amounted to much.
What I would say is actually we did change some of the history of Egypt. To the positive or to the negative, we cannot tell for now. But things have changed. People in this country have started since we appeared back in at the end of 2004 and during 2005 to try to demand their own rights much more vocally and much more actively than before. We have broken the barrier of fear. Despite all the intimidation that is taking place right now and the brutality of the police, the arrests for anybody who tried to make any kind of just a notion that he's against the government, like it happened on the 23rd of July in Alexandria with some of the activists of the Facebook, the young people of the Facebook, the 6th of April movement, who went on the seashore just chanting songs and with the Egyptian flag. Just simple nationalist songs, and they were arrested, they were beaten, and they had to spend some 10 days in jail.
But interesting that you mentioned Facebook, because some of the media outlets have called the Egyptian activists as the Facebook youth, and many would say that it's not so much the crackdown from the government that led to a lot of these protests being a damn squib, but rather the fact that all this activism, particularly on the internet, on Facebook, on blogs, are just bourgeois, elitist, only for a few Egyptians, and it doesn't actually represent the masses. How would you respond to that?
No, as a matter of fact, I would say it's otherwise. You see, people only resorted to such media as the Facebook or internet because they cannot have the alternative, that is to convene to take real action out in the street, because we cannot do this freely. Here, Egypt is a country that is under a very strong security grip. The number of individuals working in the Ministry of Interior is 1.7 million person, which is a huge number in a country like Egypt. We are not China to have 1.7 million people in the police. What are they doing? It's all political security. And their enemy is us, the people, especially the young people, because the young people are always the ones that could pose a threat to the government.
Let's pose that to Jawad. Jawad,
Yes.
in your opinion, are students targeted by the government?
I have to say that as the major problem I see is, which is different from other Western countries, is that you learn your political activism, you learn how to vote, you learn how to become politically active through the universities. And to tell you the truth, universities are not given the chance, students are not given the chance to really be politically active. And what happened is, maybe there's a positive aspect to this, is that they started working more in the civil society, in the NGOs. I mean, we've been working in Manshait Nasser, where the rock slide happened. We had young people, 18, 19, just come in with their own cars, just coming without the cars, with microbuses, with juices, with water, with no political or NGO affiliation. So they have an energy. They know that politically maybe they cannot really express it, or they cannot really go to a party that they see, whether it's Kifaya, whether it's the NDP, whether it's the Ikhwan, whether they're not any part of any of it. So they're diffusing this energy in the NGOs and in the civil society, which is positive, because we need a lot of it. I mean, and this is what we're missing. We don't have people. We really don't have people. We want people. We want younger people to come and work and participate in the civil society, in helping other poor people, in creating jobs, not just being a burden and just acting politically or.
So is someone like Ahmed a burden?
He's doing his own part in the news, in reporting. So maybe he has a positive role in his field. I mean, I'm not saying he's a burden, but I'm saying people who don't do anything at all. I mean, maybe that's what I consider a burden, and that's the majority of maybe young people.
I'm not criticizing the will that the young people have to volunteer, to help. This exists among many people. But I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about how the universities, for example, are totally under the grip of security, police that is involved in everything inside the university, even to choosing who would be the dean of a university, which professor would be invited or not, and for how long, what kind of a lecture. They are involved in every detail, whether on the level of the professors or, of course, the students that must be controlled. They get beaten up inside the universities. They get arrested inside the universities. And they are not allowed to make many of the fraternities that they wish to do.
Something that came across when I was doing my reading is there are accusations that many young Egyptians are joining the ruling NDP, not because of ideology, but just because it's lucrative, because that membership card would get them a decent job either then or a few years down the line. Is that true?
I mean, I would question first, I mean, the word many, if there are many even like joining for these lucrative kind of like privileges, which does, I mean, await them. I mean, at the beginning of the 1990s, the NDP, after they realized that they do not have any sort of base of support among the youth, they tried to launch this so-called Horas societies on the campuses. But what these Horas societies, I mean, were doing, were just like organizing trips, channeling away the energies of the youth away from the Islamist groups, and work to sabotage any sort of political activities by any political group on campus. Now, these Horas groups, you know, I mean, have evolved and mushrooms into all sorts of things now, and they have, like, I mean, different names. But it is true that, I mean, why would you join the National Democratic Party? I mean, there is no ideology to start with. I mean, you only have one ruler, and if the president wakes up and takes one decision, you know, and he can wake up on the following day and take the contrary decision, and the whole party would unanimously, I mean, support it. So there is no ideology. I mean, there is no reach out, you know, I mean, for the youth or in the slums or any of the poor communities in Egypt. There aren't really any direct benefits for the population that's coming out of the NDP. So most of those, I mean, who do join, I mean, on the university campuses, they do have some personal gains that they have in mind. But any other sincere political activists, whenever they try to do anything, they are blocked from it. I do appreciate the fact that some of the NGOs are now helping out, you know, the people in Manshait Nasser, right, which, by the way, they are demonstrating at the moment, few blocks away from us, here in downtown Cairo, in front of the Cairo governorate. Okay. Because apparently the relief efforts are not enough.
All right, well, Hussam and Jawad, stay with us. Ahmed, Salah, this is where we thank you. Thanks a lot for your thoughts.
You're welcome.
Fascinating here. It's time for a short break, gentlemen. More on Egypt's youth after this. Do stay with us.